Leon is a miserable down-bad dragon slayer whose mission is to take down the savage dragon queen and save humanity. However, everything changes when he knocks her up and is now stuck playing baby daddy. It all started one night in a distant dungeon, where two guards stood watching over a prison. Suddenly, the dragon queen, Roswace, appeared inside the dungeon, stating that she wanted to talk with someone alone. She walked inside the prison where Leon was bound with chains and asked if he was enjoying his VIP treatment. Leon asked that she end his life immediately instead of treating him worse than a filthy slave. With a sarcastic grin, Roswace asked if he sought a quick death. She moved closer and mentioned that a handsome guy with crazy riz like him shouldn't be in such a hurry to die. She scratched his face with her sharp claws and said adding a few more scars to his hot face would make him look even hotter. However, Leon, with a displeased look, asked that she stop humiliating him and just send him to the great beyond. Playfully, Roswace teased him by extending an offer, inviting him to join her Silver Dragon clan. However, with a psychotic grin, our protagonist smugly asked if she and her entire clan were worthy of having a Chad like him. Angered at those words, the dragon chick, with a single attack, sent him crashing against the prison wall. Leaning on the wall, our protagonist, clearly suffering from an internal injury, coughed up blood. Roswace stepped on his guts and asked what gave him the effrontery to be so rude to her. She asked if he thought he was still the great dragon slayer praised by mankind and still under the delusion of wiping out the dragon race. After that, she called him an ignorant moron and demanded he snap out of his delusions because it was certain that his prison would become his graveyard. Still stepping on him like a footmat, she remarked that if he had any descendants, they would have enjoyed the wealth and fame he was so desperately fighting to achieve. But unfortunately, he would die an unclapped virgin with no successor. Leon replied, asking her not to underestimate the humans. But at that moment, she wrapped his neck with her dragon tail, raised him up while strangling him to death, and called him a stubborn goat. However, Leon pointed out that from the beginning, she had made two deadly mistakes. Hearing this, she stared at him, confused, wondering what the heck he was talking about. Leon mentioned that her first mistake was being alone with a trained dragon slayer, and then, secondly, she should never have. But before completing this statement, his eyes turned red as he screamed out the words, "Go taste my blood." At that very moment, the blood curse spell was activated, and the dragon queen was hypnotized. She immediately freed his neck and started to complain of a burning sensation in her eyes. She dropped to the ground, wondering why her entire body was on fire. Her eyes turned blood red, and she panicked, questioning why on earth she was experiencing what seemed like an aphrodisiac effect. The protagonist stood towering over her, declaring that from that moment on, she would live in pain all her life. However, with her eyes closed, Roswace could feel an overwhelming surge of emotions coursing through her body. Unable to control herself any longer, she threw herself at him, landing on top of him with her jiggle physics pressed against his chest. Our guy, on the floor, wondered what in the world was wrong with this crazy chick. With Roswace staring at him strangely, Leon questioned if she was aroused or what was going on. Before he could even react, she locked his lips, kissing him passionately, giving this guy little time to gather his thoughts. An hour later, the aphrodisiac spell soon began to dissipate from her eyes. That instant, Roswace wondered why her buns were out and why she was almost unclad. Angrily, she turned to Leon and demanded to know what the heck he had done to her. Leon, laid back, calmly explained that the blood curse was a forbidden spell that had bound their souls and that this spell could only be used once in a lifetime. Furthermore, he revealed that when he died, the spell would automatically activate and give her 1,000 years of pain. In response, Roswace shouted, asking why she could feel the effect of the curse even when he was still alive. Our guy responded, saying he had never expected that the spell's side effect would cause her floodgates to swing wide open. Feeling embarrassed, Roswace screamed, asking him to shut his disgusting mouth. But that's when, with a mischievous smirk, our guy reminded her that dragons always followed the rules of monogamy. While she stared at him angrily, he revealed that after his death, she would remain single and without any offspring. Angered at those words, Roswace charged at him to claw out his heart with her bare hands. But she stopped almost immediately when Leon said there was no need because he would die soon. Slowly closing his eyes, he told her to live with a hatred of him in her heart, and that was the curse he laid on her. Shortly afterwards, Roswace was up. She moved towards Leon, who was resting on the wall unconscious, and asked if he intended to die after laying such a cruel curse on her. summoning a mystic energy from her hand. She remarked that she would never allow him to die so easily. The narration interjected with a brief history of our protagonist, Leon Cosmode, who was once a legendary dragon slayer. When he was 5, he almost ripped a neighbor's vicious dog to pieces with his bare hands, but was stopped by a passing dragon slayer who accepted him as an apprentice. At the age of 10, our boy entered the Imperial Dragon Slayer Academy, and 4 years later, he graduated as the youngest student in the history of the school. After that, he went into the dragon-slaying battlefield, eliminated countless dragons, recaptured territories, and was awarded the highest military honor in the Empire. Leon gained recognition as the strongest dragon slayer and the only hope of humanity in the war against the dragons. Well, that was until he got captured by the Dragon Clan. 2 years had passed since Leon was captured, and he had been lying in bed unconscious. Suddenly, he woke up startled. Confused, he wondered where he was while feeling an intense burning sensation in his chest. As he looked around, trying to make sense of the whole situation, someone suddenly entered the room. Before him, standing behind the door, was an emo-looking kid who seemed surprised to see him awake. Meanwhile, Leon, confused, found it impossible to believe that someone as cute as this kid could even exist. Placing his hand on his forehead, he said he could gradually understand what was going on. He assumed the only logical explanation was that he must have somehow made it to heaven because of his great contribution to humanity. Pointing at the emo kid, he claimed she must be an angel, but the kid retorted, asking, "What's an angel?" Looking at her up close, he called her an angel and asked what her name was. With a feeling of excitement, the girl said her name was Muin. Our protagonist smiled and complimented her beautiful name, all the while wondering why an angel would be a midget and, even stranger, why her hair was black and white. The girl said, according to her mom, her name meant the moon, but Leon shockingly wondered if angels also had mothers. However, he also introduced himself as Leon Cosmode, but Muin interrupted, saying his name, Leon, meant a lion. Startled, Leon inquired to know who had told her the meaning of his name, and the girl replied saying her mother. Shocked, Leon assumed there was no way her mother could know something so confidential, and then asked for her mother's name. The kid said her mother was Roswace, and our boy froze like a statue instantly from sheer shock. Still in shock, he asked if her mother was Roswace. Then he should be. The kid chimed in and said he was her father, paralyzing his nervous system. Clutching his head while sitting on the ground, he struggled to believe that the emo-looking kid was a product of the rumble that fateful night at the dungeon between him and the evil Dragon Queen. Just then, the girl called the attention of her mother, startling Leon. At that moment, Roswace entered the room, and the girl rushed to embrace her, excitedly announcing that the sleeping beauty had finally decided to wake up after 2 years. With a cheeky, evil smirk like Harley Quinn, Roswace looked into Leon's eyes and teasingly asked if he had finally woken up while Leon glared back at her, gritting his teeth in anger. Meanwhile, Muin said her mom should be happy to see her dad awake because she was so worried she visited him every day. Roswace, still wearing that creepy smile, replied, "Yeah, of course." But Leon, unconvinced, thought there was no way the evil queen would show him such affection. On the other hand, Roswace turned to her Muin, asking her to go watch Cockmelon with the excuse that she had something to say to her father. Just as the kid left, Leon, still confused, asked if he was truly the girl's father, and Roswace reaffirmed that he was her biological daughter. Furious, Leon shouted at her, saying, since she hated him so much, why the heck would she give birth to his child? And why did she even save him? Roswace responded, saying that after he had creamed her cheeks so well down at the dungeon 2 years ago, she couldn't just allow him to hit just once and die. In response, Leon said his intention was never to smash her bunda, but he had no choice. If the situation were any different, he wouldn't even touch her. Roswace moved closer and asked if touching her was such a torture that he hated it, to which Leon replied, "Of course." In a blink of an eye, she yanked his leg with her dragon tail, and Leon landed on the bed like the typical virgin, ready to get clapped in a rom-com. She climbed on top of him as Leon exclaimed, questioning what she intended to do. Without hesitation, she ripped his shirt with her sharp claw, and with a summoned magical circle at the tip of her finger, she said she would carve her dragon pattern on his body. Leon begged for her to stop, but with her finger already on his chest, she said with this, he would be her prisoner for life and would never leave her. Roswace, with her usual unsettling smile, remarked that when his fellow humans saw the dragon tattoo on his body, they wouldn't view him as the legendary dragon slayer, but rather as a traitor who had pledged allegiance to the Dragon Clan. In antagonizing pain, Leon begged her not to go to such an extent. But the evil queen moved her face closer and said he was a clueless moron who didn't know jack about anything. She said her sole intention was for him to live in shame and humiliation for the rest of his miserable life. At that moment, Leon became overwhelmed with an unexplainable sensation, and Rosways simply declared that they were only getting started. The scene cuts to the balcony, where two maids gossiped. One remarked that the queen had been in such a good mood lately, while another mentioned hearing that the queen's lively mode was because her husband had finally woken up. Meanwhile, Leon, hiding behind the castle wall, overheard the maids and was pissed at the fact that the crazy dragon queen had publicly announced that he was her husband. That's when he remembered the night before, how she almost damaged his spinal cord because she kept insisting he went deeper and harder, draining every last bit of his energy. Burning with fury, he was determined not to stay in the castle any longer or continue being her plaything. Searching for a way of escape, he looked at the castle gate and noticed 4 guards stationed there. With that realization, he knew he couldn't escape. However, he wondered why there were just a few guards stationed at the gate. This was not the case when he had infiltrated the castle 2 years ago. Looking at the side, he suddenly noticed something strange. He discovered a secret hole in the castle wall that surprised him. As he cautiously moved towards the hole, he suspected it must be a trap just to lure him inside. But he couldn't care less if it was a trap or not. He just needed to get as far away as possible from the hellish castle. He crawled inside the hole and thought this was goodbye. He would never have to see the perverted dragon queen, and for his cute daughter Muin, it was only a matter of time before he got her back. Meanwhile, Muin stared at something with great interest. Pointing at Leon inside the hole, she turned to her mother and asked why her father was acting like a madman and crawling into holes like a rabbit. Rosways, lounging with her bikini on, replied that she could very much see him. Muin asked when she planned on fishing him back, to which Rosways scolded her that her father wasn't some kind of lobster she could just fish. He was still a man even though he might have lost some couple of brain cells. Muin then asked for the right term to use, and Rosways informed her to use catch him instead. A few hours later, Leon was out in the woods running for his dear life. He understood that once he could just get beyond the mountain, he would have entered the borders of the human territory. After running for a while, he turned back while muttering that with the distance he had covered, Rosways would never catch him. But suddenly, he was startled when he heard the flap of dragon wings. Right above him was Rosways in her dragon form, hovering in the sky. Without wasting a second, she immediately charged at him while teasing him for being quite a good runner. She caught up and swiftly passed him, landing in front of him with a smirk, and said she was having fun playing with him. Staring at him with blue radiating eyes, she commented on how smooth his escape plan was and hinted that she was the one who had left the hole for him to escape. However, our protagonist pointed out that, despite it being a trap, he had no choice. He just hadn't expected her to catch on so quickly. That said, Rosways then asked what his plan was once he got to the human territory. She reminded him he still had her mark on his chest, so he shouldn't expect the humans to welcome him as the great dragon slayer. Still, Leon was determined and said he would rather choose to begin life afresh as an ordinary human being rather than stay playing 50 Shades of Grey with her. Angered by those words, Rosways flapped her wings, causing a whirlwind, and called him an ungrateful bastard. She angrily carried him with her monstrous tail and said since he wanted to return to the humans so badly, she would help him accomplish that. 3 hours later, they arrived at the Empire border city close to the human settlement, and at that instant, Rosways dropped Leon from the sky. Leon crashed into trees and finally cemented himself to the hard, unforgiving ground with a deafening thump. He stood up, holding his head in pain, but something immediately caught his attention. Before his eyes was the human settlement, nestled amidst dense vegetation. With a dumbfounded look, he asked if what he was looking at was the human town. Rosways claimed it was, and then reminded him that he couldn't just return to the long-lost human town by stepping over it. She told him he could never return, no matter how close it seemed within his reach. Suddenly, the dragon mark on Leon's chest began to glow, pushing him against the tree with great force, startling him. Moving close to him, Rosways revealed that anytime one of the two people with the dragon mark needed some jiggy action, the mark would emit a distinct reaction. Placing her hand on the glowing mark on his chest, she asked if he was starting to feel hot, itchy, and bricked up. Leon replied, asking if she wanted to commence the censored action out in the open. Rosways said yes and mentioned that the reason she had brought him to the human settlement was for him to feel shame while clapping her hard in front of his people. Clutching his chest, Leon responded firmly, declaring that he would never lose faith in his people, no matter how hard she tried to break him. He seized her hand and vowed that he would wait patiently for the perfect opportunity to exact his revenge for the humiliation she had inflicted upon him. Upon hearing this, Roswace, visibly shaken, stared at him, unsure what to say. Then, she smiled and said she would await his revenge, either dead or alive. A few minutes later, Roswace was all smiling and glittering like a woman who had just seen Heaven's Gate. She shot our guy a side glance and, with a cheeky smile, said she was satisfied with his swift waist, fast-pounding action. With a mischievous grin, she caressed his chest and said it would be a fantastic idea if she brought him every month to his hometown for some plot action. But Leon stood up immediately, calling her an evil, deluded witch whose intention was to milk the life out of him. However, Roswace ignored his statement, unleashed her dragon wings, and insisted that they return to the castle for the sake of their daughter. But Leon screamed, asking her to wait. He then mentioned that as a dragon slayer, it would be humiliating for him to be seen flying under her claws like prey, so he would rather walk all the way back to the castle. Roswace informed him that it took about 3 hours to fly to the castle at her dragon speed, but it would take 10 days or half a month to walk there. Still, Leon insisted on walking and advised her not to ever underestimate the strength of a determined man. With that being said, Roswace smiled and said she would love to see just how long the determined man could hold out for. But after walking a few miles, the lame protagonist was panting like he had just run a marathon on a flip-flop. Roswace, walking behind him, mentioned that he could ask for help instead of his pathetic attempt at being an alpha male. But Leon declined, claiming he wasn't a softie. Roswace laughed and said the only thing tough about him was his loud orangutan mouth. However, at that moment, they noticed someone approaching. It turned out to be the dragon-slaying army parading the forest. At seeing them, Leon was excited as he thought the guys could be of help to rid him of the crazy psycho chick that was on the verge of clapping him to extinction. But when he noticed the change in expression on Roswace's face like she was about to give him a good whooping, he knew she wouldn't hesitate to pulverize the soldiers to smithereens without a second thought. Just then, one of the soldiers noticed their presence and halted the movement of the cavalry. He then approached them, asking if they were lost. Thinking it would be wicked of him to implicate the soldiers, Leon told the nosy guy that everything was cool on his side. They were just hanging out. Nonetheless, the soldier warned that the forest was a dangerous place to hang out and then suggested he give them a ride. Moving close and stretching his hand for a shake, the guy introduced himself as Walker, the captain of the Imperial Dragon Slayer Army. Trying to prevent him from coming any closer, Leon thanked him for his unsolicited kindness and assured him that they were black belt holders, fully capable of protecting themselves. But just then, Walker stared at Leon and said he looked really familiar, like they'd met somewhere before. At the same time, Roswace, fuming with anger, had grown sick of seeing the guy's ugly face and was about to unleash Hell Inferno. Simultaneously, Leon realized she had already summoned dragon fire in her palm. So he quickly grabbed her hand to ease her tension. Then, he pulled her by the waist and told Walker that he must have mistaken him for someone else because even his wife sometimes mistook him for Henry Cavill. While saying that, he whispered to Roswace, pleading with her to play along and promising to return to the castle with her obediently. Seeing how loved up the couple were, Walker bid them goodbye, not wanting to disturb their moment of bliss. As soon as the soldiers left, Roswace angrily turned to Leon and asked if he had finished smooching her soft plots to his heart's content. This caused Leon to jerk back in embarrassment. With her arms folded, Roswace said it was smart of him not to have asked the soldiers for help. She poked his chest and said even though they had children together, that didn't make her his wife. Leon sighed and mentioned that he never considered himself to be her husband, either. With that, she turned and said they still had a long way to go, so it was best that they start leaving. But right then, Leon suddenly felt a burning sensation in his palm. He looked at his palm and realized it had been charred, and his vision was becoming blurry. At that moment, he collapsed to the ground, and seeing this, Roswace called him a weak Disney princess acting like a macho, and then transformed him into her dragon form. She picked him up with her mouth like some chicken wings and tossed him into the sky like a useless baseball. Our unconscious guy landed on her tail, and with that, she flew back to the castle. The following day in the castle, Leon slowly regained consciousness only to find himself in bed with Nguyen smiling all cute crouching beside him. Holding his head, he wondered how he made it back to the castle, and Nguyen informed him that Roswace had brought him back. Hearing this, Leon was mortified as he could only imagine the manner in which she must have carried him in her talons like a scared little wimp. Looking at his hand, he noticed the cute bow bandage used to dress his wound and was taken aback. Feeling a sense of pride, Muin, with sparkling eyes, mentioned that she was responsible for dressing his wound. With a look of disbelief, Leon recalled the lessons from the Dragon Masters, who had taught him that dragons were fierce creatures known for their violent tendencies from an early age. Despite Muin possessing dragon blood and tendencies, she had shown no sign of hostility towards Leon, but had treated him like a father. With that, he tapped her on the head and complimented on how awesome she was. However, he warned her not to end up like her freaky mother when she got older. Suddenly, having overheard what he said, Rosways appeared in the room and demanded to know why Leon had warned Muin not to be like her. Seeing her, the sissy instantly froze in fear and said he didn't say anything. The little girl, however, quickly rushed to meet Rosways and happily informed her that she had bandaged Leon's wound just as she instructed her. Rosways responded coldly, telling her she had done well. Even though Muin looked excited after receiving the compliment, Leon couldn't help but think that Rosways was being too harsh on the poor girl. So, he tapped her on the head and asked her to go hide in the garden while he counted 1 to 100. Excited, Muin asked if he really wanted to play hide and seek with her, and the Father of the Year replied, saying he wasn't as strict as her mother, and then urged her to run along. Happily, she bolted to the garden while Leon closed his eyes and started counting. Just as the jolly girl left, Leon angrily turned to Rosways and asked why she was too harsh on the poor little thing. Rosways replied, saying all dragons were treated that way. Furthermore, she added that only by being strict with their young ones would they grow to be strong warriors. Leon grew even angrier, pointing out that Muin wasn't a full dragon and shouldn't be treated that way. Besides, she was cute. But Rosways mentioned that dragons and cute were two conflicting words. Leon replied, saying she was also cute. Upon hearing the word cute, Rosways shot him a cold, lifeless stare, grabbed him by the shirt, and warned him to know that he was nothing more than her plaything, nothing more. At that moment, Leon's confidence immediately shattered as he stood there like a scared little girl. Following that, Rosways told him that as the queen of the Silver Dragon clan, she had a lot of government affairs to deal with, so he would have to be the nanny and take care of the kids. Later that day, Leon wandered around the garden, whining like a spoiled brat about Rosways, telling him to give up being a dragon slayer and become the kid's nanny instead. Suddenly, he noticed someone shorter than Kelvin Hart hiding behind the walls. He immediately thought it was Muin and couldn't help but find it amusing that she was gullible enough to hide behind him, thinking he wouldn't notice. So, he playfully pointed his finger at her and exclaimed, "Found you." However, he was confused when he saw the sad expression on her face and wondered what could be wrong. Feeling embarrassed, he placed his hand on his head and apologized for keeping her waiting. But just then, the girl stormed off angrily like a full-blown drama queen, leaving him more confused than before. After a while, Leon started searching for her, having seen her dash past where he was. As he continued searching everywhere, he soon grew tired and wondered which was more difficult, predicting the mood of a lady or that of a child. He thought the constant mood swings must be the reason why Rosways had pushed the task of taking care of the kid to him. Suddenly, Muin emerged from her hiding spot and wrapped her arms around him from behind, exclaiming that she had caught him. Staring down at her, he asked if she was the one who had run past him a few minutes ago. But from the look on her face, it was obvious the girl had no idea what he was talking about. She replied, saying no, adding that since he hadn't come looking for her, she decided to come look for him instead. Hearing this, Leon was shocked and wondered if who he saw earlier was Chucky. Just then, Muin grabbed him by the hand and pulled him along as she ran, eager to show him something. As they left, Muin's twin sister appeared from hiding, watching them leave angrily. Sometime later, by the pool, Muin sketched on a piece of paper, while Leon watched her silently. He couldn't help but feel remarkably proud of himself to have a daughter. Making a fist, he swore to take his daughter away from the clutches of their evil mother. Just then, Muin rushed towards him, interrupting his self-dialogue, mentioning that she wanted to show him the family portrait she drew. She showed him a piece of paper depicting 4 crayoned figures. Pointing at the little figure, Leo asked why there were 2 kids instead of 1. Muin replied, saying it was her sister, shocking Leon to his core as he wondered how Muin could possibly have a sister. But then, he reasoned that he might not have scored a goal, but a brace, hitting the jackpot with twins. At that moment, he realized that the girl he might have seen in the garden earlier must be Muin's sister, and that was why she was angry when he called her Muin. But Muin clarified that her sister wasn't angry. She was just a little bit shy. With his hand on his chin, Leon remarked that it was only normal for her to act that way since she wasn't really familiar with him. Lost in thought while staring at the castle, he figured the whole confusion was Roswace's fault for hiding the existence of his second daughter from him. Several hours later, inside the study room, Roswace was busy going through some documents when Leon angrily stormed inside her office. Roswace turned her attention to him and asked for the whereabouts of Muin. Leon said she was playing with her sister and then demanded to know why she had kept the secret of his older daughter from him. Roswace replied, saying she thought he already knew about her existence. In response, Leon started to thank her for giving birth to 2 cute daughters for him, saying she was indeed a Wonder Woman. He promised her that when he returned to the Empire, he would write her name in his family tree, which only infuriated Roswace. So, she angrily asked if he wanted to know why she didn't tell him about the existence of his eldest daughter. Leon answered and said it was because she was jealous of his closeness to Muin and was afraid Noah, his second daughter, would also be a daddy's girl. Roswace then asked if he was anxious to see Noah. In response, Leon questioned why she was asking him such a dumb question, because only a deadbeat father would not be anxious to cultivate a good relationship with his daughter. However, Roswace warned him not to regret his decision later on. Later that day, in the kitchen, Leon held a kitchen knife and, for some reason, was grinning like the Joker. While chopping carrots, he knew the first step to win his eldest daughter's heart was to prepare her a nice delicacy. He reflected on how, back in the past, everyone used to love his creamy stew, and some even called him the Gen Z Gordon Ramsay. He took a sip of the stew and confidently declared that, even though he hadn't cooked in a while, his culinary skills could still body those of MasterChef contestants. After saying that, his nose grew long like Pinocchio's as he confidently imagined Noah loving his cooking, picturing her smiling after tasting his food. Meanwhile, 2 maids of the castle watched him from the window, displaying his culinary skills. One of the maids, blushing hard, commented on how Leon was a good male dragon who took care of his family, even though he had just recovered from injury. Suddenly, Roswace arrived accompanied by the girls. She then instructed the maids not to wait up for dinner orders, but to retire for the night. After that, Roswace and the girls entered the kitchen, and on seeing them, Leon mentioned that they came just in time. Muin quickly rushed over to Leon, complimenting the mouth-watering aroma of his food. Leon smiled and told her that he had made stew and steak just for her because he had heard they were her favorites. After saying that, he glanced at Nea, expecting the same compliment. But the mean girl couldn't care less about his cooking or his ugly face. Frustrated, he wondered why it was proving really difficult to win over the girl's affection. He glanced toward Roswace and thought she must have known it would be this way. That was why she had prevented him from seeing Noah in the first place. But that moment, Roswace instructed Noah to introduce herself to her father since it was their first official meeting. So Noah smugly approached Leon and introduced herself, while Leon also introduced himself as her father. However, after his introduction, she stared at him without saying a single word. Noticing her awkward silence, Leon wondered why the midget was so cold, like a girlfriend who had caught him cheating with her best friend. However, at that moment, Muin walked up to Noah and then whispered, telling her to open up a bit more and stop embarrassing their old man. But Noah questioned if the man before her eyes was really their father, because he looked so skinny and weak, like an effeminate, and hearing this, Leon instantly spilt blood from his mouth from embarrassment. Shortly afterwards, as they ate dinner, Leon became really uncomfortable due to the awkward tension. Staring at his daughters, he noticed that even though they looked like twins, they had completely different personalities. It was obvious that Noah was as cold and emotionless as her mother. Trying to strike up a conversation, Leon asked Noah if she was enjoying his special delicacy. But Nea, without mincing words, told him his Desert of Doom was more disgusting than pig's vomit, driving an arrow straight to Leon's over-bloated ego. Hearing this, Roswace could not contain her laughter. So, Muin, seeing her laugh, asked why she was so happy. Roswace responded claiming that she was happy because their father got to reunite with the family. After saying that, she turned to Leon, asking why he was not smiling. Leon immediately smiled and claimed he was happy to be a part of the family. Raising her hand, Muin asked Leon if he would be having dinner with them every day. Leon was unsure how to answer because as much as he would love to, he also hated that he would have to eat with Roswace daily. However, before he could respond, Noah cut in, saying she would not be joining them for dinner every night. Nguyen asked why, and she replied that she would love to study at the Young Dragon Department Academy. However, Rosswace joined in the conversation, pointing out that the academy only accepted 4 to 5 years old, and then asked why she was in a hurry to enroll. Noah replied saying it was because she would love to defeat dragon slayers early, causing Leon to almost choke on his food. Trying to regain his composure, Leon reasoned that by dragon slayer, Noah must mean she wanted to defeat him. So, he tried to argue that she was too young and would get hurt. But Noah angrily asked him not to treat her like she was still a child. Rosswace then chimed in, encouraging the idea by saying the sooner Noah learned the skill, the sooner she would learn how to fight dragon slayers. Furthermore, she turned to Leon and questioned if he had any other reason why the girl shouldn't attend school. Leon figured that if he continued to oppose the decision, Noah might see him as the worst dad ever and hate him all her life. With that, he said he was cool with her enrolling. Seeing Rosswace's sarcastic smile, Leon could tell it had been the evil witch plan from the get-go to mentally attack him by putting him against Noah. Nonetheless, he resolved to get his revenge when the right time came. With the issue settled, Rosswace informed Noah that the entrance test for the academy would be held in a month, so before then, her father would help her prepare. A few minutes later, after the dinner, while the girls joked about the size of their bellies, Leon called Rosswace's attention to have a conversation. He mentioned that they needed to wash the dishes they used in eating, but Rosswace, like the typical baddie, insisted she was tired, and the servants would handle it. However, Leon insisted that, as a couple, they needed to wash the dishes together, as that would build the bond in the family. He leaned closer and whispered into her ears, asking if she wouldn't like the girls to see that they were one big happy family, even though it was all fake. Hearing this, Rosswace glanced at the girls and noticed how happy they were just by being with both of their parents, so she agreed to join in washing the dishes. But just then, Nguyen offered to join in the dishwashing, but Noah dragged her out of the kitchen like yesterday's garbage. While washing the dishes, Rosswace turned to Leon, questioning why he had abandoned her to do everything while he sat like Prince Charming. Leon replied asking if she had forgotten what he told her 2 years ago. He reminded her that he had once warned her never to be alone with a highly trained and strong dragon slayer. At those words, Rosswace shouted, asking him what he intended to do to her. With a desolate look, Leon replied, saying earlier on he had traveled a long distance and was exhausted. That was why she was able to control his body with her dragon pattern. But now, everything had changed. At those words, Rosswace immediately attacked him with her sharp dragon tail, warning him not to try anything funny like trying to escape. But with one hand, Leon blocked her attack, and while grabbing her tail firmly, he said he wasn't planning on running away. Suddenly, the crested tattoo on Rosswace's chest began to glow, triggering a surge in her plot hormones. She instantly dropped to the ground as her floodgates opened for some deep penetration. Still squeezing onto her tail tightly, Leon smirked like a true protagonist and then informed her that he had learned new knowledge from the dragon books. He stated that whenever her tail was pinched, it made her weak and powerless. At that moment, Rosswace started breathing heavily like her heart was about to explode. So, she begged Leon to let go of her tail. But Leon refused, pointing out how he had been treated worse than trash by her since he woke up and had been nothing but a toy for her amusement. Furthermore, he declared that they would be switching things up that night, causing Rosswace to yell and call him a perv. Suddenly, there was a knock on the kitchen door that startled them. It turned out to be the nosy maids asking if they were done with the family love feast. Without waiting for a reply, they entered the kitchen and were surprised at how clean the place was. While the jobless dumb maids continued to be fascinated at how spotless the dishes were, Leon and Rosswace hid behind the storage room door. Leon immediately grabbed Rosswace by the chin, warning her not to make a sound. He cautioned that if they were discovered by the maids, it would be shameful for Rosswace if her subjects got to see so desperate. A few minutes later, as the maids left, Leon immediately grabbed Rosswace by the neck and said it was time the steamy workout session commenced. 3 days later, the girls sat by Leon's bedside, wondering why their father hadn't woken up for 3 days. To confirm if he was still alive, Noah kicked his ugly face, prompting him to react in pain. While stepping on his face, Noah told Nguyen that he wasn't dead yet. Just then, Rosswace walked into the room, so Nguyen informed her that Leon was finally awake. At the same time, Leon struggled to sit up and then asked Rosswace why he had fainted. Rosswace replied, asking if he needed help in jogging his memory. At hearing this, Leon recalled being slapped hard across the face after the dragon pattern had been deactivated following the clapping session in the storage room. as he stared at her back in the present. Leon thought Roswace was indeed cruel for smacking him so hard. If he had been an ordinary person, he would have died instantly. However, upon close inspection, he realized she was pretty even after living for 200 years. Roswace tried picking up a hairpin from the table, but fumbled it, and it fell to the ground. But at that moment, she noticed someone picking up the hairpin for her. You already know it's Leon, who helped place it nicely on her and complimented how she looked. Surprised, Roswace said in her wildest imagination, she had never expected him to be so considerate. However, the smooth way he inserted the hairpin only showed that he must have done it for other chicks before. Leon retorts that when he was a kid, he used to comb his master's donkey's hair, which made him skilled in anything hairy. Muin immediately rushed at him, asking what a donkey was. Leon explained that a donkey was like a dragon with 2 ears and a tail, but was known to be as stubborn as her mother. Upon hearing this, Roswace's sucker punched his guts, and as he clutched his stomach in pain, Muin asked if he was fine, and he replied, saying he was okay. Changing the subject, Roswace informed the girls that their task for the day would be to learn how to write their names, which their father would teach them. Muin instantly became excited at hearing this, but Noah was clearly displeased and insisted she knew how to write. Nonetheless, Muin grabbed her hand and dragged her to the study room to find a pen for the lesson. Just as the girls left, Roswace informed Leon that her sister would be coming over to the house, so she would not want to see his disgusting face anywhere in front of her. Leon, however, questioned why she didn't want him to meet her family. In response, Roswace leaned towards his ear and said that, according to his new identity, he was now a male dragon married into the Silver Dragon clan. So, if he intended to meet any member of her family, he would have to play along with the identity she had made up for him. Leon claimed he understood, but just as she started to leave, he thought there was no way in hell he would obey her like a loyal puppy. With a smirk, he resolved to embarrass her in front of his sister. Later, in the kids' study room, Leon commenced the writing lesson with the girls. He wrote their names on a piece of paper and instructed them to imitate it a few times. Noah glanced at the paper with her name scribbled on it and remarked that even chicken scratchings were more legible than his rubbish handwriting. Leon quickly left before she could roast him more promising to check on them later. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the Silver Castle gate, a red-haired chick walked majestically inside the castle. This red-haired, drop-dead gorgeous was no other than Roswace's elder sister, Isha. Seeing her, Roswace immediately rushed over and embraced her tightly, overjoyed to see her after such a long time. Following that, Isha complimented her beauty, saying she looked more chubby, causing Roswace to feel slightly embarrassed. Isha then asked to meet with her husband, whom she had heard so much about. But Roswace lied that Leon was unwell and could not meet for the time being. Changing the topic, Isha commended the love Roswace shared with her husband, considering that most bonds between dragons were mostly for profit and clan relationships. But Roswace shook her head in disagreement, saying just because they were married and had kids didn't mean she was attracted to him in any way. At those words, Isha smiled while thinking that her sister hadn't changed a bit and was still as stubborn as a goat. Roswace then grabbed her and insisted they head to the garden so they could catch up on old times. Meanwhile, from a telescopic view, Leon could see Roswace and her smoking hot sister. So, to commence his plan of embarrassing Roswace, he decided to activate the dragon pattern from far up the castle. At the same time, while walking to the garden, Isha discussed with Roswace, informing her of a recent threat to the dragon family, the Red Flame Dragon King. Roswace asked if, by Red Flame Dragon King, she meant Constantine. On confirming this, Roswace asked to know why Constantine had decided to show his face after so many years. Isha replied, saying it might be because he was on a mission to expand his territory. Suddenly, the dragon pattern on Roswace's chest began to glow, shocking her. Surprised, she wondered why it had activated at such an inconvenient time. Noticing her flushed face, Isha asked what the problem was, to which Roswace responded, saying nothing was wrong and she was fine. However, Roswace was certain it was all the doing of that worthless dragon slayer and cursed him silently in her heart. Meanwhile, Isha, who was already ahead of her, was explaining the need to reinforce the border defenses in case of an attack from Constantine. While Roswace, visible shaken, had been overwhelmed by the unshakable urge to jump on Leon's anaconda. At that moment, Isha noticed she wasn't quite fine and asked again if everything was all right with her. Realizing she could no longer suppress her urges, Roswace suddenly claimed to have remembered something urgent she needed to do and hastily excused herself, promising to return in 20 minutes. With that, she stormed off angrily while Isha observed her closely, suspecting that her sister might be toying with the dragon pattern. Meanwhile, our boy reclined on the chair, saying he would love to see how long Roswace could endure. But at that moment, Roswace angrily burst inside the room, calling out his name. Without wasting a second, she grabbed him by the shirt, demanding to know why he had deliberately chosen to resonate the dragon pattern, knowing she was with her sister. Leon, however, contemplated that it would be best if he acted innocent and fooled the dumb queen. So he remarked if it was wrong for a husband to desire his wife. Upon hearing this, Roswace was flustered as her face burned redder than a tomato. Seeing this, Leon was satisfied that his plan had worked, and she must be totally disgusted. But then, Roswace called him a shameless perv and asked him to rid his mind of such cultured thoughts. Still, she wondered why hearing those words had such a weird effect on her. Nonetheless, she began to take her leave, but not before warning Leon not to repeat what he had done. Behind her, however, Leon couldn't resist quietly mocking her. As she left, he placed his hand on his chin, and he figured that by just saying naughty words to Roswace, she became totally helpless. But then the problem was, he didn't understand why whenever he thought of her face, his heart beat faster than a ninja on a foot race. However, he instantly shook his head while urging himself to stop thinking like a simp. And that was when he remembered that the girls were still waiting for him back in the study room. Later that night, at the castle gate, Isha informed Roswace that she would be leaving. Roswace then bid her farewell and asked her to be careful on the way. With that, Isha transformed into a ferocious red dragon, and pointed out that next time she would love to meet her husband, and then soared to the sky alongside her other dragons. Just as she left, Roswace's facial expression changed. She was determined to teach Leon a lesson that night for the embarrassment he had caused her that day. Meanwhile, Leon's nose suddenly grew longer, and while reading bedtime stories to the girls, he wondered if it was because Roswace was talking about him. Noticing the girls had fallen asleep, he covered them up like a good papa to prevent them from catching a cold. After that, he silently opened and shut the door of the kids' room to prevent them from waking up. But suddenly, he heard someone's voice behind him, startling him. Of course, it was Roswace, her stare lifeless, who questioned where Leon thought he was rushing to. Leon, slightly uncomfortable, asked if her sister had gone, but Roswace replied, saying he shouldn't be in a hurry because they still had things to do. Just then, she dragged him across the floor and into her bedroom. Once inside, Leon prepared hot water, and then asked Roswace what she needed it for. Roswace replied, complaining of how tired she was from walking all day, and asked that he wash her feet. Hearing this, Leon looked shocked beyond belief. But Roswace ordered him to do as he was told because it was punishment for the rubbish stunt he pulled. With no choice, Leon held her foot while thinking about how his life as a dragon slayer had become so miserable that he was now a filthy foot-washing slave for a female dragon. While stroking her bare feet, he wondered how many dragon slayers she might have stepped on with her feet. At that moment, Roswace noticed him staring at her feet like they were diamonds from icebox and wondered why he was staring. She contemplated that it must be because her feet were smelling. But before she could figure out the reason, Leon dipped her feet inside the hot bucket of water. But she immediately took out her leg and delivered a nice Liu Kang kick to his jaw, spitting blood. Leon collapsed to the ground while she stepped on him, asking if he was trying to take revenge on her by boiling her legs. Leon forced a smile and retorted that she was the one who had asked for a feet wash. Roswace pressed her feet harder on his guts, while telling him that he probably never imagined a day would come when he'd be stepped on by a dragon. As she moved her feet down his pickle, Leon almost jizzed his pant white, so he begged her to stop before he exploded his cream all over the floor. Roswace, with an intense stare, said that was exactly what she wanted. However, Leon refused to give in to her evil manipulation, so he grabbed her feet and said he had eaten most animals' legs, but he had yet to eat a dragon's leg. Roswace shouted, asking him what he was trying to do. But in a split second, Leon sank his teeth deep into her leg as if it were a Thanksgiving turkey. The next day, Muin and Noah woke to see Roswace limping with a bandaged leg, so they demanded to know why she was limping, to which she replied, saying nothing. They also noticed Leon's swollen bandaged cheek, so they asked what happened to his face, to which Leon also replied, saying nothing. Seeing that both their parents were not forthcoming about the truth, Muin became curious and thought deeply. After thorough thinking, she raised her hand and said they must have played some fun games without involving her, adding that she'd love to join in the next round. Will our Dragon Slayer abandon his duty to his people and remain a family man, or will he execute his duty by defeating the Dragon Queen? Comment Dragon Slayer if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.